Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Filip Radukic, and I'm the product manager and senior consultant here at SA Experts, and as such responsible for the universal plan to your web services, including the UPV browser, browser-based viewing, and associated technologies. Today, I'll be taking you on a tour of the all-new UPV Web Services and the integration features that have been added to these. As always, the session will be recorded and we will provide you the link to the recording subsequently by email. At any time during the webinar, feel free to use the questions panel to state your questions, and I will try to answer as many as possible after the session, or actually after the live demo. And well, this being said, let's actually get in the middle of things. So what is the agenda for today? We'll have a general concept overview of what actually UPV Web Services are. Then we'll go a bit deeper into the details of the UPV browser as the successor of the old folder browser. We'll have a look at browser-based viewing and what has changed here. We'll have a look at the user and permission management, at the API applications and deep linking capabilities, and last but not least, software and hardware requirements for these, and a preview of the workflow system, which is let's call it a sneak preview to the upcoming webinar in 2 weeks. So, talking about the general concept, what are the general issues we face with locally installed apps? First of all, deploying and installing software to each client is necessary and quite time-consuming. Not every stakeholder has an adequate hardware to support all models. So when we're talking about engineering staff with workstations, it's a total different thing than, for example, project managers with laptops with built-in graphic cards and lower power. And also in connection to this, usable model sizes can be limited by, for example, mobile hardware and, for example, RAM, CPU, and similar on iOS and Android. So what would the solution look like? First of all, we would need to outsource CPU and GPU power to a centralized server. No plugins or specific software or hardware would be required. And we could stream graphics and human interface device input like mouse and keyboard only, limiting the data transfer. Additionally, we can also actually set individual permissions for users independent from their Windows logins using single sign-on systems and similar. We'll get into the details of this during the webinar. So the approach we take here, we actually considered all these details and created an easy setup for the UPV Web Services and UPV Render Services, a centralized config in the UPV Web Services user interface, and an easy-to-use, appealing front end for the end user. And on the other hand, easy to administrate from the front end for the admins. We have a full integration with any single sign-on system that supports the OpenID Connect protocol, and made integration of API applications a lot easier for seamless integration in your existing ecosystem. So UPV Web Services come in 3 different bundles with different features added with every bundle. First of all, there's the UPV Web Services Basic, including the identity server for authentication, and the UPV browser that's basically providing a platform for model distribution to the local apps. Then the next step would be UPV Web Services Advanced, includes all of the basic features and additionally the browser-based viewing technology. And the UPV Web Services Pro includes all advanced features and additionally the workflow system for collaboration company-wide without any additional software on the client needed. So to put it in graphics, would be what it basically looks like. You see the single modules or bundles built upon each other. So this was it for the general overview. I think best described, this would be best described in a live demo, and this is what we're going to do now. Just a second. So our login screen would look like this. So when we're talking about the UPV browser, I'm choosing a login now. That's only giving us access to the UPV browser features. The user is called browser only. So when I log in with this, you see open locally set for all models here. I have two options for the UPV browser, open locally or download to the client. So basically download a cache to make the model available for offline usage. So the moment I click on open locally, UPV starting, let me just move it here, and it's calling for a authentication from the server before actually uploading the file to the model here. We can see this basically on the screen. We get a login page just in case there was any problem with authenticating. We can also trigger the authentication manually. After the model has loaded, we can actually shut this tab, and you see we've entered the model and have full access in a local application. The rights can be assigned individually and independent from the simple Windows authentication, but can be used with any system supporting the OpenID Connect protocol. I will be coming back to that a bit later. So when it comes to browser-based viewing, what is changing here? Let me just log out from my browser only and have auto login with our public user. And you see the models available to the public user directly. So additionally to open locally and download, now we have a function called Open in Browser, which allows us to use basically any regular UPV function without any local installation. So when I click Open in Browser, it takes an instant and we're in the model. And talking about a regular demo plant that many of you might already know and have been walking around in, we can basically also preload. I will be coming back to that later too. Preload basically models of any size. For this, let me again switch users. But instead of this auto login user and my browser only user, this time I'm going to use my Adfs Authentication. So basically using my Azure Cloud account for authentication, and you see it's recognized me. So in this case, the data for login is not stored on the server at all. It's just sending a request to the Azure Cloud asking, okay, is he authenticated? Yes, if he is, so just give me the username and the email address, and I'll let this person in. And at that point, we can assign group memberships, which we'll have a look at in a minute. So with the users logged in under UPV browser models, we also have the dashboard, which is an admin view. So only admins can access this site, where it will show us basically which models have been preloaded, which models are available, how my licensing usage is. So here we're having an unlimited license, but basically the free slots would have been shown in yellow as a piece of this cake here. And what else can we see here? Well, let me actually go to the models and just open the demo plant again, and then go back to the dashboard, where we can now see we have one instance preloading because I've actually taken one preloaded session and one session that is used. Under the used session, I can exactly see which model has been opened and who opened the model. In this case, it's me, belonging to the two groups, say experts and public. My email address and the time I have actually requested the session. And the moment I close the session, it will take a few seconds to update here, but you will see that the session has been released again almost instantly. So when we talk about preloading, how's this actually done? On the settings page, every watchdog or every render server that's connecting to our IIS front end identifies itself. We can set default values that any new render server logging in to the web services will take. And we have another tab here showing currently I only have one render server connected here called public demo, where I can set the maximum resolution allowed, the idle time before a model actually shuts down. So if I'm not using this one for 10 minutes, it will close the session, but that can also be set. I can set a maximum of instances allowed for this render server. Then I can actually set a search path to look for models on the render server. And once I entered this path and hit save, it will automatically send me all the models it's found under this folder. And now we have several settings here. First of all, I can set the maximum streams for this folder. So if I have several project teams, I can set up folders on the render server for each of them and limit the number of maximum streams per folder, thus basically dispersing my number of licenses and sharing it to different, up to a specified amount of streams to the certain folder. I can also limit maximum streams per model, which is done here. And I can set preload. So what does preload actually mean? Preload means that we're preloading a model on the server and it's already available for user usage for user login directly. So we're not having any loading times. What's the advantage of this? When we go back to our models here, I have a model called Huge Demo, and this is a model about the size 2.7 by 2.5 kilometers, I think. So it's, what is it, about between 1.5 and 1.5 by 1.75 miles. So it's a demo plant 1,024 times. So copied 64 times in its length and 64 times in its width and 16 times in its length to basically get this huge model displayed. And you see in it, it came up within just mere seconds. And even if I pick any object far in the back and I said, okay, do a fit here, it will reload the information within seconds and basically enable me to move around the model almost instantly at any point here. And we'll talk about huge plants here. So that's made of preloading, so we can actually hold the models ready here. So, which some of you might have noticed, we have a few different indicators here. These green spots, what are these for? These green spots basically indicate that a model has been preloaded. So that's also one of the major changes. We can instantly see, okay, is the model already preloaded or is it still preloading? I could basically trigger that by saying, okay, opening a huge demo and closing it again. And because I had preloaded 2 instances, let me do that 2 times. And now you see the light has actually switched to yellow. This means we have a session starting currently, at least one. So when I click on it and try to open it, it might take some time to load. And when I go to the dashboard, you still see here one session is starting while the other's already preloaded. So besides that, having a look at browser-based viewing, one detail I might also mention here, we can edit preview images. We can also edit descriptions, add tags, and also connect the UPV local models to the UPV browsing models to actually have them displayed as one model and having those options open locally or download, or basically open in browser. So you can change the display name without changing the model name underneath. And what is all of this for? Well, basically for a better overview here, I can search, for example, for huge. It will give me the huge demo. I can search for construction. It will give me the construction building. And I can type in Arch as an architecture. Well, it's not part of any name. So why did it find this model? We can actually see this by switching from the tile to the list view. And in the list view, you see the tags I have defined for my models. They're also showing up in the list view, and the search is searching equally for the string in the names and as part of the tags. That way, I can basically use any type of tag or identification, additional identification for any model here. So going through all of this, now what is the workflow system? So on our demo server, we have not activated the workflow system. Let me switch to a different server where we have basically 2 examples, with 2 models here, and a workflows system setup. In the workflow system, I can, for example, add an item saying, okay, this is test 002. The planned project would be test 1, and it's assigned to me. Workflow type would be a change request, internal rework, work order, malfunction. Oh, let's choose a malfunction report. Sounds good. Actually, not the malfunction report, but the example. So the status is new. That's right. Severity, well, I would say fixed with the next regular work. Area would be refining area A. The P&ID would be, let's say, this one here. Discipline, piping, due date, Friday. And a note, let's say, flange leakage detected. I hit save, not save and close, and basically a new issue has been assigned here. And in our history, I can already see the changes I've done. And now I could comment on this, or some other users could comment on this. I can also say, okay, please show me the 3D model. Okay, that sounds good. So you see, additionally to our model in the files tree, now we get another node named test 002, because that's the name of my issue here. And I could say, for example, okay, the flange here is actually leaking, so I want to do markup in red, draw a circle and say, okay, hello, here's my leakage. So all I have to do now is hit save, and it will save a screenshot of the issue I just marked up. I can also go ahead and go to full screen mode from the workflow system, or dock it back on, close it, close the issue completely. And also now in my list here, I have an icon where I do see a preview of my issue that I've marked up, or I can actually go into the issue, say show 3D model, and it will not only open the model, but also load the markup I just made. So that's one of many functions that my colleague will actually show to you in 2 weeks' time in the follow-up webinar for the workflow system. Let's actually go back to the issue of user management. So here in the users, I can enter users directly by email, a password, or I can use, as I mentioned before, any system supporting the OpenID Connect protocol, like Azure ADFS or Windows ADFS, or, well, there's, I think, tons of single sign-on systems out there. But I can also manage user groups. For example, I could open up this one and say, okay, I belong to user group C experts, but I could also make it a developer or a product manager. Let's add this one here. And I can add features like admin, UPV browser maintainer. That's the person that's allowed to change preview images in the UPV browser, and tags and descriptions. Regular users can just see them. And workflow system user, so giving additional permission to actually look into the workflows. Here we can also remove certain permissions, or change the password, which only works if the user has been created in the UPV Web Services. If it's coming from an outside authority, obviously you have not access to that, and then this button basically has no deeper function. User groups can also be created easily, as you see here. And additionally, when we're using ADFS, I can also go to update group and basically copy the group UID. So no matter what my group is named here, I can basically connect it to an ADFS group, so that group membership will be automatically imported to the UPV Web Services from ADFS2. And the permissions can be set for the local storage and the browser-based viewing individually. So if we go back to the other server, maybe we have a bit more models here. You can basically see that for UPV browser only, the user I logged in with before, I blocked all browser-based viewing accesses. So that's why we only had download and open locally as options until I logged in with a different user. So we can also individually separate who can access browser-based viewing, who can access the download model, and who can access both. And in the UI settings, we can set, for example, now in HTML, available CA experts demo models. I could, for example, add a 2 here and say submit. So when I go to models, you see now it says available CA experts demo models 2. You could, for example, also add a logo, company logo here, and change this header to anything you will need. So additionally, in the UI settings, let me change this back. You can also add graphics and links like I had here for our download icons. And we can set direct links to pages that will appear here under links. So let's say I want to remove this one. See, it's instantly gone. Or I could add HTTPS. Actually, not in the display name. It would be Google search. And here it would be HTTPS / www.google.com/search $Q equals CA experts. Submit, and when I click on the link, it would open a Google search searching for CA experts. So this is our changed UI settings here that we can do. Besides the user management, the permissions management that we've actually had a look at. And we have the option to develop, or for you to develop your own API applications. How would that work? Again, let me switch to the other example here, where we have Munich Northeast 2 and Munich Northeast 2 API. Basically, we're having two copies of the same model. When I open up this one, it goes straight into the model, and it's a regular UPV behavior as you know it. But additionally, I can also, under information, edit, I can add a startup API application path. So that's application folders where we have JavaScript applications set using our API. So in this case, I'll use event callback first. So when I click submit, I say open a browser. You'll notice, first of all, it zooms out to show the whole model. And now I've actually used the API calls. Whenever I click something, it registered, I clicked something, then the code sends back a command, please colorize that one red. And you see, whenever I click on something, it will be colorized red and keeps its color no matter how for what I click next, until it actually clicks somewhere into empty space. So it detects a click in empty space and then reverts all coloring. That would be an easy example of API callback functionalities. But let's go a step further and actually have a look at all possible API calls, but just changing the application here that it's using for the API. Now I'm opening the same model, and you see I actually get my API test page here. For example, registering event callbacks. Whenever I click on an item, it sends back the UID of the object selected. And with this test, you can actually test all types of API calls that UPV has built in. And last but not least, we also have an option to use deep linking with browser-based viewing. For this, we have a small application that is actually switching our command or UPV API calls from a local machine to the UPV Web Services. So I started this one up here. So instead of local viewer, all I have to do is switch to UPV Web Services and enter the UPV Web Services signaling server URL, hit OK, and at this moment, we've actually switched our commands to go to the UPV browser. So I can go ahead in the browser-based viewing, copy a link, and let me open a small Excel form I created for doing actually link tests. Just because I'm a very lazy person here, basically when I paste a link here, it's creating a named hyperlink on the left-hand side. But when you scroll over it, you see it's basically this UPV API link I put in here. But before I actually run this link, let me zoom out here and click on, let's say, this object here. And once I click the link, it actually opens up the model and highlights the stack I selected before. And now I can also do a link to this tank here. Just paste it and call it Munich Northeast Tank 1. So my link has been created. And when I click on the link, basically it switches to the model and highlights that. This way enabling also all types of deep links going straight into the models. So about software and hardware requirements, I've actually seen that I've already exceeded my time. So for the software and hardware requirements, we have PDF files, also individualized for different use cases. So talk about the architecture here. Let me just hide this panel. For on-premise servers or for Microsoft Azure Cloud Server, also with recommendations of individual server versions and server offers from Azure that we would recommend for different usages, and the same thing for the Oracle Cloud. So if you need more detailed information about this, feel free to contact us.